Okay, hello. Holy cow. Sorry about that. I was like trying to get some stuff done and I am late. So thank you very much for coming on. This is How-To Diorama with Scale Modelcraft, and this week has been exactly like this. All of this week, it has just been crazy. I hardly got any model building done because what I'm doing is I'm trying to get my video signal and all of those things correct. So, I've got different stuff going here. Can everybody hear me fine? I mean, is everything going good? I don't even know if my stuff is showing up. Oh, I've got some folks on. Hello, Paul. Christopher, thanks very much for coming in. Paul is from the UK. Eric is here. Thanks very much, Eric, for coming by. John's here. Hello, John. Really glad to see you here. And I've got If I Could Paint. Now, If I Could Paint, I hope you can see this. I hope you can hear it. I've been doing a whole lot of stuff trying to get, things working. I found that, okay, so number one, I was doing Wi-Fi. So I'm at the model desk, right? And I don't have a Wi-Fi Ethernet connection out here. I have one in my office, but I don't have one here. So all week, what I did was I ordered a bunch of equipment, which is great. I love B&H. I don't know if anybody's interested in photography stuff, but that's where I get a lot of my stuff. Most everything photography is from B&H. They're out of New York and they're great. They've been really nice to me over many years now. And everything seemed to get here right now. I literally just got the last thing I ordered, which is a camera. I just ordered a new Sony camera so that I can have my direct. Right now I'm off the laptop, and I think this new Sony is going to give me the ability to do like a front face thing, where it's a little bit better. And I can still do my up, top, down shots. And we're going to do that today on the demo. So we're going to be doing down shots on top of the desk. And I'm going to be building and showing you how to build a basic diorama base. And I think it'll be a lot of fun because we've talked about it a lot, but I mean, I think we can go a lot deeper into it, and I want to answer questions as I go along. So we'll do it live. You'll be able to see it and everything. And I think it'll be really cool. Much better quality today. That's wonderful. If I Could Paint, you're having to drop off a couple of times because you weren't getting a good feed. That was a big part of doing this. So I'm really happy that it's coming across properly. And Paul says sound much better too. I've got a new little mic, and it's one that I've used before on my cameras, but I've got it situated in such a way that it's like right here, right below me. So should be really nice and clear. So thanks very much. Eric, sounds great. Bill, read you loud and clear. That's fantastic. Thanks very much, everybody. Mark, sorry, but I got to go. Work calls, meetings at noon on Friday. Should be online by 12:30. Well, that's awesome. Thanks very much, Mark. And yeah, I know 12 o'clock. That's pretty rough for a meeting, but I don't know. We're going to be waiting for you to come back is what we're going to do. We're all just going to sit around. But no, just joking. Mark's great, and I love Mark. So thank you, Mark. That'll be great. We can't wait for you to come back. So I think I'm going to try to just dive right into this, because the cool thing is, we've talked about kind of just using Mod Podge and building a base using that method. But there's a lot of other stuff that I can do, or I can show you how to do. And so that's what I'm going to show you here real quick. So I'm so scattered today because I just literally was doing this stuff. This is what I kind of want to demonstrate today. This is a really roughly put together, I've got my pink foam in there and I've got it glued down, and I've just put a piece of rock that is a casting out of plaster on there, and it's really rough. And you notice that a lot of times what I'll do is I will use, instead of something like this, I'll use my rotary tool to sculpt things, and that's how I get my surface. And then on that pink foam surface, I'll apply Mod Podge and Sanded grout. Well, there's different ways to do it, and I just wanted to show you. And this is the other method that I've used and I really like. So this is an older diorama that I did, and it's called Eastern Front Ambush. It's got some Russian soldiers, and they're set up on this little precipice over what's to be a frozen lake. And so it started out with, this and this. And what I've added here, the white that you see, is all toilet paper. So maybe it's better for me to say tissue paper. I don't know, but it's all toilet paper. And the cool thing about it is when I'm doing this, and I'm going to go back to me real quick so I can show you. When I'm doing this, there's a few things to kind of think about when you're getting your supply, okay? And I think from now on, we're just going to call it supply, okay? So now my supply here is got some imprints on it. Can you see that? It's kind of hard to see, but it's got some embossing. And if you're going to do tarping, if you're going to be making like something where it's like hanging over something and it's a tarp, you probably don't want to use that. For today, for making, textured terrain, totally fine. It's not a problem. But if you're making tarps out of this, which it works wonderfully for, you don't want to have something that has any embossing on it, because the embossing will actually stay. And in a couple of dioramas I've done this, it does stay, and you can tell. I mean, I've painted it out and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's something to consider. So we're going to be using this. And then what you're doing is you're mixing it with Mod Podge and water. So this is my, I've had this for a long, long time. And Mod Podge and water mixed together, 50-50, is a really nice solution. What it does is it mixes with the supply paper, and it kind of breaks it down, and it makes it into a moldable surface. So it's not just like a filler, like you need to stuff it into a crack or some opening in the stuff, and you want something to kind of fill that gap so you can put other stuff. It's not that at all. You can use it for that, certainly, but it also allows you to actually sculpt it. There's a point in which the paper, its properties, it will break down and become very, very sculptable. Okay? So it's like sculpting mold. I've not personally used sculpting mold. Sculpting mold is maybe a little bit similar, but it has plaster in it as well. So it's got paper, fiber, and plaster. I'm just using this directly, and it works great. So we're going to look at a little bit more of these. When I put this in here, I'm kind of taking in some places just globs of it and placing it in there, and then pressing it down while I'm dripping the Mod Podge and water on it. And I had a quick question here from if I could paint. So let's look at that real quick. Do you find the toilet paper, not only does it take forever to dry, but it also, I think it means warps. Yeah, because he says down below warps. Yes, and it can. So this is a really good point. And we're going to talk about that today, if I could paint, because when you're putting this stuff on here, there's some really neat properties to it. Number one, like I said, it's sculptable, and you put these wads in there and you put the paper in there, and then it needs to dry. Well, the neat thing is when it's drying, it's not really shrinking much. Some mediums you use, they'll shrink a little bit. So it's not shrinking down a lot. It is just getting rid of the water, and it does take time. It could be a couple of days depending on, humidity and things like that. So you do want to be careful with that. You don't expect to maybe working on the next day. But the great thing about it is the lightness of it. So when you're using a plaster product, or you're using something heavier, even, the sanded grout, if you use a whole bunch of it, it can get a little bit heavy. But this is really lightweight. So that's something to consider in building your diorama as well. Super flexible, has ability to be molded, lightweight, and pretty darned available. Readily available. You don't have to go to a specialty store a lot of times. You could absolutely use just regular PVA white glue instead of Mod Podge. At this point, it's not going to make a difference. That would work just fine. So literally, this is something that you could probably use from home. Um, the other property of it is when this is wet and you mold it and let it dry, just wet with just water, if you let it dry, it will also stiffen in the form that you've molded it in. So you still do have that, you know. I like to put the Mod Podge because it adds a little bit more structure to it. Okay, because it does. The Mod Podge and the glue will add structure to it. So we'll look at how to do that here in a little bit. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, that's all fine and well, but how's it going to look? Well, the great thing about this is as you're doing it, it's still going to finish just like everything else. Is the texture quite absorbent? Does it, the TP, need to be sealed? There you go. Great question, Eric. The Mod Podge will seal it. If you do it with just water, it won't. Okay, so there's like the balance point. If I did just water, it would, if you introduced any kind of liquid, water, chemical, whatever, it would get very pliable again. But what you could do is spray over it without using, you know, your Mod Podge and water. Spray over it with a sealer. Totally would work fine. I think the problem is if you get a lot of cracks and crevices and stuff like that, and you don't get the sealer everywhere, then that could be problematic. In this process, where I'm mixing it with the sealer and with the Mod Podge as I'm doing it, it basically creates a sealed surface just by doing it like this. So I really like it. It's really fun. Now, this is not my process. This is a process that was that I saw from one of my, you know, real good inspirations, Marklin of Sweden. And I've got his information on my channel. If you look down, I've got a playlist of some of those folks. Marklin of Sweden is one of them. Now, he also does water with toilet paper, and it's really remarkable. I'm telling you, it sounds odd, but it's absolutely remarkable. This stuff, when it dries, is almost clear in some instances. So it's very flexible. I think it's a fantastic material to use. And if you haven't tried it, I think it's really good. Now, the reason that I thought this would be interesting to talk about today is I spoke to a new patron last night, Daniel. And Dan asked, you know, about doing this stuff. And I wasn't sure if you had all the tools or materials that you may need to, you know, work or carve or shape your pink foam the way you want for your diorama. So this is a method to do that without having a rotary tool. And by the way, this is what it looks like after it's been painted and finished, right? It's just like any other terrain. You're not losing anything. There's no detail loss. There's no inability to add all the same weathering and detailing products that would normally use just by using a different type of medium underneath it. It works just like everything else. Holds up really nicely too. I did this a long time ago. It's for my nephew, and I want to say, gosh, it's 6 or 7 years old, and it's held up great. You know, it needs a little bit of work, but you can put your paint, you can put all of your detail directly on it, and it just works wonderfully. Okay, so now I think we're going to stop right there, and I want to show you this process live, how to do this, and how to make just a standardized base. So I'm going to switch this thing around a little bit, and I'm going to show you what I'm showing you right now. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. We will do that. And now I've got my top-down camera. And, you know, one of the things that I did this week was I got some equipment that's going to allow me to do this switching back and forth and certainly a much better picture going forward. So anytime I do a diorama, I'm gonna personally put it on a piece of MDF. This is just a small piece of MDF. I had scrap. It looks like what, 8 by 5.5, 6 inches, something like that. And it's important because I've done it on thinner substrate. This is 1/4 of an inch. I've done it like on 1/8" plywood, and it will bend when not just this product that I'm going to talk about, you know, when we're using the TP, but even paint on top of pink foam can cause the pink foam to bend. I don't know if this will show me bending, but it can cause it to bend a little bit, okay, as it dries. And so it'll pull it up. Well, you don't want to, you know, your diorama, you know, racking around. So you want to adhere this to a piece of substrate. And that's what I'm going to do here. Now, typically what I do is I'll use this foam tack glue. Now, I like foam tack glue because what it does is it goes on this surface and then it goes on the surface of the pink foam, and then you let it dry. It goes on white in color, and then you let it dry. Now, once it's dried, then you can mate the two together. It's kind of like doing, you know, rubber cement. You want the two sides to kind of dry. And the reason is this. This is a non-permeable surface. This is permeable somewhat, you know, it's flat, but I mean, it, you know, you can get a little air through there. And this stuff needs air to dry. All glues typically need an air to dry, unless it's like a PVC type of glue. So what I want to do is I want to use this kind of stuff to glue this on here, and that works great. And the reason I prefer to do that is it gets a real nice hold. I can make sure it's working, you know, all the way around. I don't have any gaps. Well, today, just to show that it can be done in a different way, I'm going to use a hot glue gun, but not any hot glue gun. This is a Woodland Scenics hot glue gun, and it uses a little different glue. This glue is a low temperature hot glue. So that's good in a couple of ways. Number one, if you've got young fingers, young hands that are working on your dioramas with you, then this is not quite as hot, and it's not going to burn those young hands. But the other thing is, it's not going to burn really and melt this plastic. This plastic is obviously it's thermally reactive. It'll burn, it'll melt away if I get too much on it. This is supposed to not do that. So I'm just going to show you how, you know, we use this instead. So now, obviously this is too big. And again, what I'm trying to show you is if you don't have the tools, it's easy enough to try to get a nice surface. So I'm just going to literally break these and try to get some pieces to put together, you know, for my diorama. And so those are the pieces. I might get some more here, but I just wanted to get something that's going to give me a very, I guess, varied background. I want some interest in this background. So kind of like the example I was showing you, I'm going to have a rear that's a little bit higher and maybe come down a little bit. And then maybe something in front of it like this. And if you look from the side, see it's kind of stepped. I'll do that. And then we got some more here, and I'll put that in there. And like that. That looks pretty good. I don't want to go too much. I want to have room here for like a vehicle or something like that. So now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue and hot glue these down. The other reason I'm not hugely fond of hot glue typically is when I do the hot glue, and if I should have to use a rotary tool and cut through this, the hot glue will gum up your bit. And that's no fun. So that's one of the other reasons I tend to stay away from hot glue. So now I haven't really put anything on the bottom of those, but I'm going to come in here and just shoot some hot glue down here because I want them to stick real well. And I can kind of now do this, and that'll stick them together a little bit better. Okay. And again, the efficiency that I'm getting out of this is just speed. I don't think it's any better than doing anything else other than it being cold. But I think being able to do this quick is really awesome, especially since I'm doing this live demo. So once that's on there, I'm not going to really wait. I can just dive in. And so here is our profile. See, I've got a nice little profile already worked up. And what I need to do is I need to contour that. I need to create kind of a, you know, we want it to look like earth. We don't want it to look like a bunch of this foam. So that's when I'm going to bring out the Mod Podge. And this is my Mod Podge. It's Mod Podge and water, 50-50 cut. And I'll just give me some in here. That's for my brush, but I'm going to pour some directly on when I get some of our TP in here. And now I'm going to kind of do, just like I was saying before, I'm just going to kind of press in here because it will fill gaps pretty good and just kind of get some on here. I'm not worried about it disrupting anything because once it gets wet down and once I get it in here, again, it is sculptable. I can mold it. It will actually start to break down a little bit and allow me to get in there and change it. So you see, it doesn't take much, obviously pretty absorbent. And as this soaks in, I'm just going to continue to press it in. Now, I like to have a little bit of water, and I just use my brush. And adding water to it's not going to hurt at all. Adding the water helps just get everything soaked real nice. Now, again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get a little bit more natural contour of the land here. I don't want it so blocky. So I'm just adding these at random places to kind of smooth the transitions between these very rough square blocks. So here I'll do a little bit more and kind of come up on top here. This is where I can dip into here just to kind of get a little bit of a hold. And then I go right back to this guy. As this soaks in, it immediately starts to break down the paper. So the things that got wet earlier on are already starting to break down so that I can start to mold them. The more water, the better. Water helps it break down. So that breakdown point is kind of something I'm looking for because that's really going to give me the ability to shape it the way I want. I also don't want to pick up any kind of fold or something like that. Now, that could help with some kind of a rock face, sure. But right now, I just want to kind of homogenize this all to make it like dirt and things like that. So some more of this. I'm using a fair amount too. You'll notice it's going kind of everywhere. There will be a point where I'm going to want to take some of it off. But right now, I just want to get everything nicely doused with this solution so I can cover all the rock. Or, well, I say rock, it's not rock, it's just going to be land. Now, if I wanted to add rock, I'd probably come back with either real rock and set them in or use some of my plaster rocks. I do like those little sets from Woodland Scenics where it's like a little mold that you can make your own rocks and stuff. I think it's fantastic because you don't have to use the mold all the time. You can break up what comes out of the mold and you create your own rock surfaces, and it works just great. So you see that? Now this looks kind of like a pile. I'm not trying to make any comments there that are wrong, but it does kind of look like a pile. But as this breaks down, and that's happening now down here, I can start to shape, and that's just about where we're at. So I think you can see here, and I'm trying to show you the front. We've now got this stuff all over, and I'm just going back with my brush. I can throw a little bit of water in there, patting it down, and getting a nice smooth surface. It doesn't look, like some block or something like that anymore. I want to try to get a nice surface. So that is building up your ground over the top of some foam with really minimal tools. I didn't even cut them. And I wanted to show that because if you don't have those tools, that doesn't mean you can't do quite a bit, you know? I think it's really, look, you get an idea in your head and you really want to work with something and you want to build something, you're going to find a way. And that's kind of the, the process that I use. I'm going to find a way to do it. And if I don't have the materials, I think it's a lot of fun to figure out what materials I can use to accomplish what I'm trying to do. It just makes it kind of fun because it's all also kind of a discovery of, holy cow, I didn't know I could do that, or that's just a neat kind of way to do it. Earlier today, I went ahead and posted how I keep my dioramas protected by placing like a cloth over them, and it was using some piano wire, and got a lot of nice comments on that, and quite a few folks looked at it. And I think that's the kind of stuff that I think is fun when you discover, look, I had this material, I never thought I would use it for this, and then I find a new use for it. That is just so awesome. That is really fun stuff. Okay, so I think we can stop there because I think you can see what I'm talking about. I'm trying to get the light here, so I'm going to have the right shadows so you can kind of see what it's done. But it's on there, and we've got, I think this is a bit linear. I need to interrupt that kind of a straight line there. Boy, it's not. I'm going to turn this light off and see if we can get a better shadow. See, there's a much better shadow. The other thing is it gives a pretty neat terrain, the roughness of this. So it shows up, I think, pretty darn good underneath what you're going to put on it later. So yeah, there you go. That is the start of that. Now we're going to move on to Mod Podge and Sanded Grout. Now, I was going to do it on another one, but you know what? We can totally do it on this. Now, look, this thing is not done, and I would continue working on this, making a little bit more rounded transitions, these linear kind of things. But it's not that rocks don't do that, so it could work out fine. But what I do want to do is just show you how I can put things right on top of this, the Sanded Grout and the Mod Podge, to get the final texture. Typically, what I would do is I would let this dry completely and then do the Mod Podge. It's okay. It's not going to hurt it, to do it this way. But that's just typically what I do. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, the Sanded Grout that I use is this. I'm holding it sideways here so you can see it. This is Polyblend Sanded Grout. I'm not promoting. Well, I'm not promoting them, but I'm promoting the product of what I use, certainly. I love this stuff. I use Haystack. It's just kind of a nice neutral color. And then I'll put it in something like this so it's a little bit easier to work with. Now, here's something to be cautious of. This stuff is very powdery and very flyaway, meaning that I could get a big dust up coming from this stuff. So that's something to be cautious of. But think about what it is too. If I add just water, not Mod Podge, just water, it's going to solidify. So there's got to be some cement or something in there. I don't want to breathe this stuff, so I want to be super careful. I also don't want to get any of this dust on my electronics. I got electronics all over the place, so I want to be really careful with this stuff. So just, take that for my advice. Now, I could put, because this is still pretty wet, this right on here. I'm not going to because I want to show you the process. And the process is I use straight Mod Podge on my terrain when I put it on. So that's why I'm doing it this way. The fact that this is wet would allow us to do it direct, but I just want to show you what the process is. So I am just going to, and I'm going to do this up here too. I am just putting Mod Podge on here, and I'm just kind of putting it on there relatively thick. And there's different ways of doing it. I like it thick, and I also like to put this on unfiltered, but we're going to look at a different way to do it as well. And by unfiltered, what I mean is there is a method to put your sanded grout on through either a sieve or like a strainer, or even a like a nylon, like a pantyhose nylon. And what that does is it preserves and makes the texture that you have underneath. There's a better shot of the texture up here that I've done. It makes that texture really come out. It does a fantastic job when you put just a very, very light coating of this right over the top. I like to do it a little different because you look inside here and you can see, I'm going to try to use something. Here we go. You can see there's like clumps, right? And it's not completely powdery. Sorry, I got out of the camera there. But there's like clumps in there. And those clumps, to me, are wonderful because they look like soil. And even though if I take one of these clumps right here in its dry form, I can just basically, just crush it. Once I put it down and I put some Mod Podge on it and then a little bit of alcohol, it'll make it hard as a rock. And then I can simulate rocks and small pebbles just from what's out of this. So that's just one of the things I do. I see other people filter it and blah, 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 which again, works fine. But for my purpose, I'm going to do it this way. Now, you can use just a spoon, a plastic spoon works great. I have this little scooper guy and works real nice too. There's another thing that I like to do, and I'm trying to find what I use. I'll take a small stick. This is just a piece of wood. I'll take a small stick and then I'll tap. And by doing that, just little bits come out at a time. And I can really control it. I don't want to just how you think you just kind of go over and shake it. And I've done that of larger areas, but when I want to get real tight, I just kind of do this. I'm tapping a little bit in there at a time, and I can control it a heck of a lot better by doing that. So now I've got some on there, and you see there's some of those clumps in there too. And by getting those clumps in there, I think I'm getting some nice texture. So to preserve those clumps, what I need to do is either get some of this Mod Podge on it, or some alcohol. And I'm going to go with alcohol because what alcohol does is it breaks the surface tension. This is just isopropyl alcohol. It's in a little bottle here. I'm going to drop it instead of spraying it because I just don't want it to go everywhere. But by doing this first, what I do is just break the surface tension. And what I typically will do is I'll have it in a like I said, the sprayer, and I can just get it much lighter than these drops. And that then allows me to come back with the Mod Podge, and look at this. It just soaks right in. With the Mod Podge and water mixture, with just that little bit of alcohol on there first, and like I said, I did a heck of a lot of alcohol. It would be less than this typically. It allows that surface tension to be broken, and then these drops of Mod Podge are going to go ahead and soak through. Now, that's a really important part, and I want to slow down here and talk about this a little bit, because getting your Mod Podge to soak through your sanded grout is pretty important. The reason is, remember when I took one of these little clods right here, this little sanded grout clod right there, that is not a rock, and you can't hardly see it, I'm sorry, but that is not a rock right there. That's just a piece of sanded grout. Well, if I don't get that completely permeated with Mod Podge, when it dries, it'll just crumble and it'll look kind of dumb. So I need to get that stuff completely soaked with Mod Podge. It'll dry, become rock hard, and it'll be a rock. Now, we'll still paint it, but I'm just telling you, it'll look much better that way. Okay, so now that's going good. I am going to put more Mod Podge on the rest of this. And because I think you need a little bit bigger area. And this is a lot of times how I do it. I just pour it on here, you know. The other thing is when you're putting Mod Podge on, if you get it too thick and it pools, it will show the pool when you put on the sanded grout. So if you don't want, a little pool there, make sure you spread your Mod Podge out well enough that it doesn't create little pools that will look like a little flat area, because the sanded grout will just get on the surface of it and not soak in. So I am just putting here, and then we're going to take sanded grout and go all over this thing. And I think it's going to show up a little bit better on the camera, by having all of this done. So we'll get a little more in here. This is Mod Podge flat or matte. I like Mod Podge matte because there's no shine to it once it dries. And that then allows you to, you can change it if you want, but that gives me almost an invisible glue once it dries on my diorama. So I'm not introducing some shine where I want it to be, flat. Like I said, if you want shine, you can add a paint or a sealer and get shine out of it. But I like to start with everything flat and then go from there. Now here it's not as big of a deal because it's going to be under the sanded grout. But I think one thing that's important is, even after I've put this on here, I might do another coat. I might put some more on. So if I have just the flat, Mod Podge, I think it's going to look better. So now this time I am going to kind of do the big whammy. I think what I'll do is I'll show you how it looks through a strainer, because it looks really good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it doesn't give me some of those clumps that I like. So here's how it goes with a strainer. And this one is a pretty open mesh, but it puts it on there like nobody's business and gets a lot of area covered in a real, see, there's those little clumps that I like to preserve. I'm going to put that into the camera. I love these little clumps because they turn into little rocks. Right now, they'll just crush if I hit them. So I'm going to go a little bit more here so I can get the whole front. And then I think you'll be able to see it a lot better on camera too. And then we'll do the same thing as I did with the top area. We'll hit it with some alcohol. And this time I'll spray it. I'll take it off camera and spray it because I just don't want to make a huge mess like I've already done. But I think it'll look up pretty good. So I'm going to spray this with some alcohol. Give me a second. So the little sprayer that I'm using, I'm just doing it like over my garbage can here. The nice thing about this, it gives a real, see, there you go. It's all sprayed. And it gives a real nice thin coating over everything. And so it's real smooth in here. And some people really prefer that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's not my preference. I like it to be a little bit more rough, a little bit more textured. And I got a couple of comments that I am just completely ignoring here. So let's go back to those real quick. So John is here. Hello. Well, you were here before, but you were just saying. In case you exposed. Oh, okay. Sorry. In case like this where there's exposed MDF, would you recommend sealing the MDF first? Not necessarily. This will seal it, real nice. I love Mod Podge. It will seal the MDF just like the other stuff. So going directly on it is not a problem. It will eventually be sealed. So very good point. It does need to be sealed. So just make sure you seal the whole thing during the whole process. And Eric says, I was about to ask the same question. And then that's cool and so fast. And that's the other thing. I think it is really fast. It is something that you can do relatively quick. Now I can go and work on other things while this is drying. And I know I've got a nice little base started for what I'm working on. Okay. Josh says, howdy. Thank you very much for coming by, Josh. Nice to see you, sir. John is waving hi. He knows Josh. And then if I could paint, just so you know, if you add cornstarch to normal PVA or Mod Podge shiny, it makes it matte. That's fantastic. Thanks very much. If I could paint this before it sealed, before it dried, before everything had kind of solidified, I start doing this. And what it's doing is it's drawing stuff up, and it's just varying a little bit. These are going to dry, and they're going to make this really weird pattern that you wouldn't see. And I really liked it. And I started doing it when I needed, it's rolling away a little bit more than I wanted. But I started doing it when I did Tarawa, that diorama, because this is just going to give some randomness. And if these connect, it's better. It gives some randomness that you can't really manufacture. I'm trying to manufacture it, of course, but it really helps. So anything you do to your ground at this work or at this point is really going to translate later on to a lot more detail. You see what it's doing there? It's making these little patterns where it's soaking in. And here in a second, I'll show you the next step, because we're going to tap some of this stuff away because it's not dry yet. And it'll leave these little higher areas. So you can do a lot of texturing. It's not just put it down and do it and then keep adding. You can still, make things happen with it, as it's drying. Okay, so now those are dried well enough. Now watch this. I'm going to get some of that to fall away. Okay, now look, I'm not sure how well you can see that. I need to, maybe get a different picture of it, but there's a lot of now texture and variation in the ground here, and it can make really, really cool patterns. So I wanted to show you that, because once that is set, once that is done, you'll get these really cool differentiating patterns in the groundwork, instead of just leaving it, like I said, and trying to add stuff to it. Great in desert, great where you don't have a lot of plants. You still want some visual interest. When we're trying to create visual interest in a diorama, the base is the base. I mean, it's the very first thing that you do. And I think it's important because this sets the tone for what you're going to do for your diorama from that point on. You can do whatever you want, but I would suggest not just doing a flat base and then, you do a runway or whatever. I've seen plenty of those. Take a little time, use your materials, use the kinds of things that you have to try to make these variations. Get experimental. I'm hugely experimental, and that's how I find this stuff in here, how I can make this stuff do this. It's really cool because it looks kind of like, in the desert, you see sand and stuff do all kinds of weird things. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show you on this. Now I'm going to show you something a little different. This is a huge mess. Sometimes, and this might be a little difficult to see, but sometimes I want to do something, and I've done this a few times and it works great, but I want to do something on a contoured piece that's already done. I've got some detail in there that I need something on it, but I don't want it to stick to it. Okay. And this is not like anything that's all that difficult to figure out, but it's just something that I don't see a lot of people doing. And I've done it a couple of times because it's pretty important. And I'm just using saran wrap. So what I'm doing is I need to get this contour, right? For what I'm doing, whatever, I need this contour, right? And I'm basically making a mold. So I just use a little bit of saran wrap. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little cheesecloth, and I'm going to take that cheesecloth and use it just as kind of like a structure for the Mod Podge to dry on, and then I can take this and use it anywhere I like. Now, the cool thing is, so now I've got it, so, cheesecloth, I've done it like this, and it works just fine. But I'm going to double it up because I want it a little bit stronger. So I've got two deals here. And, I've got to moisten them down. It'd be probably better to dunk them in something and then place them here, but I just don't have that here. So I'm just going to do our regular deal. I am using Mod Podge. This one you can't use just water. You have to use Mod Podge. There's some surface tension there. I need to hit that with a little of my alcohol. That'll get rid of that surface tension even on the fabric. So that helps a lot. And the glue now is just kind of going right into the cheesecloth. Okay. So now I can come in, since it's allowing it to soak in much better, and it'll kind of go down the contour here. And so here I've got my cheesecloth getting soaked up real nice. Okay. And now I can come in with my sanded grout. And the cool thing is it'll keep its total shape. It's not gonna, I mean, this thing will just be, it'll look just like land, right? It'll just look like the slope, just like we're making, but I can take it off of here now and I can use it wherever the heck I want. And that's the thing I like about it, because I guess in diorama making, you kind of come up on these things all the time, different situations that you never thought you would. And the fun thing is when you kind of experiment and find these ways of doing stuff, you don't know now when you're going to use this, but now that you know how to use it, you can plan for it. And then I think you can be a little bit more creative because you've got another technique. So now it's hard to see with the top-down camera, but the profile of this is pretty extreme. So it's, you see there on the side, it's a little drop off. But because I've got the saran wrap here, once this dries, I can take it off, I can trim it off, I can get it off, and I've got this little land set of land, like a slope. I can put grass on it, I can put a tree in, I can do whatever I want, but it's just this. There's no substrate under it whatsoever, right? So that's just another way of doing ground. And I think kind of a neat way. You don't know when the situation's going to come up, but I was doing it for like a cave. I had a gap in between two pieces. I put the cheesecloth over it, did this over the top, flipped it over, did it on the inside. I got a cave. And it was just so much cooler than doing it like carving out and stuff like that. And it also makes it a lot thinner in case you have to kind of go up underneath it and maybe put some electrical. So that's the other thing. If I'm using this and it's just this really thin thing, I can put things through it much easier than I can put them all the way through this. Ground lighting is something that, I've done. If you're interested, you can do it as well. Well, this makes it easier to come through this after it dries, of course, than coming through the base of something like this. It's 2 inches thick to get some lighting through there or some wiring or whatever you're doing. So that is another way that you can do groundwork. And I really like that groundwork. It really makes it easy and flexible to do stuff. So that is done. We'll get that out of the way. And now I kind of want to talk about, I want to answer any questions that you have, but I also kind of want to talk about the ideas I have for my next diorama. So let me see if I can clean up a little bit of this. I'm going to change my camera. There we go. The hot mess is back. And, like I said, I want us to talk a little bit now about my new diorama that I'm working on, and part of the reason for why I was doing groundwork today, because that's what I'm thinking about. Groundwork is huge. Groundwork is going to be on every diorama, right? Oh, and we got some comments. Mark is back. Thanks very much, Mark. Hey, Mark, and you missed it. I had a coughing fit. That was just great television right there. But when I was trying to figure out my latest diorama, which is including the Rolls Royce by Meng and the Lancaster by Copper State Models, I had a couple of ideas. I love doing underground stuff. You may know if you've seen some of my other stuff, but I also kind of like, sci-fi. I like to kind of have something sci-fi in, even if it's a regular story, a regular incident that I'm talking about. So two things came to mind. Number one, the Hound of Mons. Now, it's over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I got to find who it was, but they commented when I was thinking about doing another World War I diorama, and they said, "How about the Hound of Mons?" And I'm like, "What's the Hound of Mons?" And I read about it, and it's really cool. So the Hound of Mons was basically like a dire wolf or a ghostly apparition of a wolf that would take people in World War I from the trenches and attack both sides. It wasn't like just the French or just the English or just the Germans. It was like everywhere. Happened in Mons. And so there's a really neat story behind it. I like that idea a lot. It has a lot of opportunity for, number one, a dire wolf would be fun, because the Hound of Mons was supposed to be this massive wolf, and it was thought that it was possibly something that the Germans or even Russians had bred to be this massive, wolf that was taking people out in World War I. But it's only a myth. So that's one idea. That was the number one idea that I had. The number two idea, and this is also one that I've thought about an awful long time, is the Levens. What is it? The Levens Gallery flamethrower. It's basically an underground flamethrower. It's 52 feet long, something like that. It is something that was dug under no man's land, and then it would be assembled. And once it was fully assembled, it would push a nozzle up out of the earth. It would literally cut through the earth. And then this nozzle could be rotated, and then it would fire a stream of fire, oil and fire. And that mixture was not something that would just like flash. It wasn't like propane. It was heavy enough that it would deposit oil in the areas that it was deployed and continue to burn. So it was a devastating weapon. A number of years ago, there was a show done, and they recreated not the Levens gun, this flamethrower, but they recreated its effect. So some British military built this machine, and it was devastating, absolutely devastating. They also dug one of these up. They found one that was still underground where a tunnel had collapsed in France during World War I, and they located the remains of that. So lots of diagrams, lots of interest in that. And I personally have wanted to do something underground. Well, with every one of my dioramas, I honestly want to do something underground, but it's got to fit, right? It's got to be something that, is appropriate and it works. Just going underground is just silly if you don't have a reason. So there's two reasons I want to go underground in World War I. Number one, that Levens gun. But number two, to talk about the diggers that dug through that white chalk in northern France. I mean, gosh, these folks were just doing an incredible job underneath there from both sides, and an extremely scary job. So 30 to 40 feet or more below ground, 30 meters, I think somebody said in one of the things I watched. That's very intriguing. they would go down there and set charges, but they also did this Livens gun. And so that might be it. So those are the two ideas I'm floating right now. It could change, but so far that's it. I really like it. There's a lot of scratch building for the Livens gun. I like that a lot. There's a lot of technical things. I like that a lot. Hoses, all kinds of stuff, tanks of fuel. It was a long thing. I want to say it was 52 feet long because it was basically compressed air and fuel, and then they ignite it. So yeah, I'm thinking that would be very, very cool to build. Mark says, LOL, flamethrower would offer options for fire and LEDs. Sounds so cool. Yeah, and that's the other thing. That above ground doing like a fire stream through the, I've never done one. I thought I was going to do one before, and it just never materialized. So yeah, I'd sure like to do one of those. Yes, awesome. I agree. I also think, though, would I be doing a disservice if I tried to do the Hound of Mons and the Livens gun? Well, the Livens gun was very specifically deployed. There were 4 of them built and 4 of them deployed in World War I. That was it. It was near the end of the war. And Mons is very, very specific. The Hound of Mons was in Mons, but it might. So anyway, I'm still trying to figure it out. I do believe that this is going to work because it took a lot of supplies. It took, I want to say, they said 300 or 400 men to be able to deploy one of these guns underground during World War I. So that would mean these would come in deployment very well, unloading. Because I did have an issue earlier before, because remember my wheel issue, I did do a little short about the fact that I messed up the dualies on the back of this. And so I and I have the front wheels and the side spare wheels. I don't have the dualies. Maybe I had to cover them up. Well, I could hide them, I suppose, behind crates and stuff that they're unloading to build the Livens gun, which would be great because, man, I'm telling you, these were a bummer. When I started working on the Lancaster from Copper State, it's got these spokes, which look fantastic. And I am just psyched about putting these together. So I don't think there's going to be any problems with the Lancaster. I did start working on it last night, but I'm only on the chassis. I really, this week has just been a nightmare because of all the equipment that I brought in to try to get, a better broadcast out. And I think it's helping. Content, that's separate. I got to work on that. But at least you're seeing this stuff a lot better than in the past. LED noodles might work well for the fire effect. I think that's a really good bet, John. I've been looking for what in the heck to do, with those noodles because I think they're cool as all get out. But I didn't have really a good application for them yet. Hound of Mons Easter egg. And it could be, you could have all that going on, and then you got a little Hand of Mons out there. I don't know. The other one I think was the Crystal Knock. No, that's not it. That's a bad thing. There was the Christmas where there was also a football game broke out between the British and the French and the Germans in World War I. And so that actually did happen during one of the Christmases during the war. That's also obviously very compelling. So those are, but I think the Hound of Mons and certainly the Livens gun, those two are really those are the front runners and could definitely, help with my want to do something underground. Even the Hound of Mons would be easy enough to do underground because there was so much trenching and underground and things like that. So I'm excited, very, very excited, by the way, to do that. But we're just going to have to see how it goes. John, right on. And yes, I do believe it was 1914. Might have, I got to go back and look, John. I'm sorry, Mark. Yeah, I think so. That would be pretty cool. I would like to get, I guess, a dire wolf and print it first, kind of see how that looks in 35th scale, right? Because everything's 35th. I got a bunch of figures and I can, do what I need to do with them. But to get that wolf, that dire wolf, to get that built up, that would, I think, be great. And of course, one of the things about the Hound of Mons was the eyes. The eyes were lit. So there you go. I would have to figure out how to light the eyes of the dire wolf, which I think is wonderful. It's a very challenging project. And I love challenges. So I like that part. But man, that Livens gun, holy cow. It just, because of the length of it and what it did and the fire and blah, just very, very scary. And I think that would be a great one. Bjorn Jacobson does a lot of LED fire in his dioramas. I'm not sure if you spelled his name right. He's got a book out too. That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Eric. Because when I do new stuff, when I kind of venture out, I mean, it is so cool that on YouTube you can find these things today. If there's anything you're interested in, you can find it on YouTube, and how to do it and how to do it well. And I want to be one of those providers. I don't want to just, I've said this before, I don't want to constantly take from other people. I want to give back, and I want to show you how to do stuff that I've learned too. So once I get it, I'll get back to you. I will say this: every single technique that I've ever learned online, I've been able to put a spin on it that either they didn't go in that direction or it's different in some way. I use that knowledge that they're providing, and that's wonderful. And I'm hoping you're doing that, with me too. Anything I give you, I would love for you to take it and make it your own. Find something, that you can do with it, that you can influence it and say, this is how this person did it, but this is how I do it. And I think that's fun, because that's that whole standing on the shoulders, of someone. You're using that knowledge and they're helping you get to somewhere. There's other ways to read that analogy, but that's the way I like to think of it. So thank you very much. So what else do I got? So that's the new diorama. How about we talk a little bit about equipment? I'm talking to a new patron, and he's really nice. He's got some really neat ideas. And one of his interests would be to possibly produce videos, or produce like I do, videos for you, or do live streams or shorts or whatever. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. This last week, it became very imperative that I get networking out here. So when somebody is starting their channel, when somebody is trying to present, there's a lot of stuff that is available out there, but there's also a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I've seen that people don't tell you. They tell you what equipment and stuff like that, but then it's like, what length of cable? How many cables? What do you do with your cables? That kind of thing. And so I think there's still more to talk about. So I want to offer that. I'm not going to go into that because we talk about dioramas here, but I want to offer that up to people. If you are interested in how I do this, how I produce this, how I do anything in the shop, to include videos, photography, editing, and producing videos, all that kind of stuff, please ask. I want to give that information back because it has been a wonderful journey. It has been a really neat thing to do. It is something that I'm continuing to do. And this last week, it was kind of a commitment point because I had to make a little bit of a jump towards some new equipment that really meant I can do a better delivery and I can get better content out to you, and certainly much clearer, by just some modifications that I had to do out here and with the purchase of some equipment. Some of the equipment that I got may be interesting to you. And so ask me about it. I'd love to talk to you about it. We can do it, offline afterwards, DMs or texts or whatever. And I'd love to share my experiences with you. I've been doing this now for 11. I saw 11 up here, and so I said 11. I've been doing this for 11 years. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. And it's really starting to do something, which is great. It's starting to pick up, and folks are starting to contact me. I get contacted every single day, and to talk about stuff. I do consulting. And it's really neat. It's a great life. And if you're interested in it, I'd love to talk to you about it. So I don't think we have any other questions. It's only an hour and 6 minutes today, but that's okay. I kind of went over everything. And if you don't have any questions, I don't want to just kind of beleaguer it. If I Could Paint says, I want to appreciate the work that you put into the quality of image and sound. That's just absolutely excellent. Thank you and well done. Thank you very much. Because If I Can Paint, that was something that really kind of weirded me out initially. I would go back and look at them, or, like we had last week and the week before, I got comments, and those are valuable comments, folks. I need to hear them, that said, hey, look, I'm not getting the image, or bad sound. And there's been multiple times that that's happened as I go through and learn all this stuff and get the proper equipment to go ahead and bring this to you. So yeah, please ask. And if you see something that's not right, hey, say something, I'm really trying to make it something that's enjoyable to see. You want to come back, and we can have those conversations. Great demo today. Love the cheesecloth trick. Yeah, that cheesecloth is pretty awesome. I did it as a roof in my Tarawa diorama on the second level over the artillery piece, the artillery position that's underground. That's the roof. And the cool thing about it is, just like you're saying, John, is, and like I was saying before, it's thin, so you can put stuff through it. So lighting. So I've got lighting going through the roof. And when I take the other, piece of the other level off, I have full access to work on that. And when you see the roof from the inside, because it's got, what looks like roof material on it, it looks like roof. So it's just a really cool way to do it. And I've done other stuff that way too. When I'm joining two layers of a level, because I like to have multiple layers, a lot of times, and there has to be kind of like some details that come over to the other layer. That's the same thing. I use the just stretch tight, plastic wrap. It's very thin. It's not going to, change the dimensions or anything. You get it really down on that stuff, and you can put something over it. And then when it's all dry, you just lift it off. Done deal. Works great. Mark says, are you using 1-inch insulation foam or some other product today? So I had 1-inch today, which I like. This is the 1-inch foam. You can buy the 1-inch foam in, I think, much more manageable sizes from your Home, Depot or Lowe's or whatever your home center store is in your area. I hope you can get it. So these come in like about a 2 by 2 foot size, about $8, I think. They used to be a lot cheaper, but they're about $8, and it's 1-inch thick. It's really easy to work with. The thicker stuff that I use quite a bit, and you've seen me use this quite a bit, this is the 2-inch. Now, for the 2-inch, it's great if you're going to have a lot of contour. It's great if you want thinner stuff and you've got a hot wire knife. It's kind of a bummer if you want thinner, you're trying to cut it down, you don't have those things. It's kind of hard. And it's really, it's not hard. It's just, it makes a mess, a massive mess. So getting it in 1-inch just makes it a lot easier to start off with. But if you're doing big stuff, yes, I'm having some of this. I've not been able to purchase this except in like large industrial 4x8 sheets, the big, huge sheets of it, like for insulating a house. Or actually, I think they've got 16-inch wide ones so they can go between joists, but it's, 8 foot long. So you decide, what works best for you. But I like using that stuff quite a bit because it's readily available. It's pretty darned inexpensive, and it's lightweight. Everything I did today, you could do with plaster. You could do with plaster and you could build it up. But the one diorama that I did some plaster in, a fair amount, but not too much, is so heavy. I mean, it's a really heavy diorama. And if you if you possibly have a display in your house, a lot of those nice displays have glass shelves, which are pretty tough and they can take some weight, but I worry about putting a heavy diorama on a glass shelf. So weight is something that we want to consider if you're doing a larger diorama. You don't want to have it so heavy, So think about the TP. It works just fantastic. Yeah, Home Depot has 2x2 by 1 inch. Perfect. That's where I've gotten it. Yep. $9 in Everett, 35 by 45 for the full size 2-inch sheets. See, boy, that's pretty inexpensive because I've got the wire cutter, and the hot wire cutter allows me to take even the 1 inch and put it up on its end and run it through and kind of, split it. And that's nice. So if I need thinner pieces. Now, one of my friends overseas, he uses thin and it's black foam, and it carves great, and he does groundwork for it. CW Modeling and also Barbarossa they both use that thinner stuff, but I think I've seen CW Modeling use it more. And CW Modeling, folks, if you haven't seen, he's great. He's definitely one of my influences, and he's on my channel. So please go look at CW Modeling. But yeah, he does this great stuff. He's an architect. So when he uses this really thin foam, it's great for like building walls, like brick walls and things like that. Or if you're going to do cobblestone streets or something like that. So I need to find out what that is. It's black in color. It looks to me different. It looks not quite the same as this. It might certainly be, but that is a material that I want to try that I have not. But pretty cool stuff. Standard Woodland Scenics wire cutter or some other type. I like Woodland Scenics. The wire cutter that and they have that. The wire cutter that I have is a Proxon, Proxon, and it's been fantastic. It's the table one. I've had it for a couple, if not 3 years now. Works fantastic because you can take the wire and set it straight, and it'll stay straight, and then you move your piece through it instead of taking it by the handle like I've seen some, and then you're moving through it. There's advantages to both. I'm used to moving material through a cutting surface, like on the table saw that I have, woodworking, but either one would work. Either one would work just great. And like I said, I like Woodland Scenics. I think they've got great stuff. Okay. So, what else am I talking about? Oh, I keep going back to this equipment thing. I have a switcher. I got a new camera, so I'm going to have a new camera right in front of me. So right now, I've been using my camera lately off of my MacBook Pro, which is great. It's a super nice camera. It's a great computer. It's my editing computer, but it's not quite the same. And it doesn't have the focal range that an actual camera has. So next week, and even later tonight, when we do the live build with the patrons, that is going to have the new camera set up and everything, and I'll be happy to show it to you, and switching and the whole thing. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a lot nicer. So next week you'll see that, and then folks tonight will see it as well. Okay, folks. Well, that is our show for today. I had a wonderful time. I hope you did. Just forget about that part where I choked and was, spitting up water and coughing and all that kind of stuff. It happens. And, I'm looking forward to this weekend. This weekend is going to be a really fun build with the AMPS Seattle folks. So AMP Seattle is having a neat meeting this weekend. And then Sunday, I'm going to be running some Ethernet through the shop. So I've literally got an Ethernet cord on the floor here to get the signal out today. But I'm going to run that stuff and get it all done, and it's going to be a lot nicer. So thank you very much. I really had a great time today. I hope you did too. And I'm looking forward to next time. We'll see ya. Bye-bye.